Okay, so we're going through the Agadot in Masechet Niddah. We're in the middle of discussions about pregnancy and childbirth, and this week in particular, I think there's a message that's underlying the Agadot that we'll be learning that has a lot of relevance in the modern world, perhaps even more so than in the days of Chazal, and that's about how all the distractions in life that surround us makes it difficult to stop and appreciate, the miracle of life and the miracle of the gift that we've been given from Hashem through our existence and every day. And in particular, there's nowhere that's more prominent than in the act of childbirth. That when a child comes into the world, it's a moment of such miraculousness that there's nothing that you can do but just stand in awe of the Creator, that He's able to bring life into the world in that way. And we'll see some midrashim that in a very poetic way, I think, try to describe that dissonance between us encountering that miracle, but at the same time continuing on with our life and not really being disillusioned from it or not really letting it be something that guides us in how we view the world. And we'll get to there through a halachic discussion that the Gemara in Niddah is going to start with here. So on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Bet, the Gemara says, "Shalu Talmidav et Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, mipnei ma amra Torah yoledet meviah korban." Right, so Ishaki Tazra v'Yalda Zachar. Right, when a woman has a child, the Torah tells us that she's supposed to bring a korban, and the assumption about bringing a korban is it's because you did something wrong and you have to atone for it. But what did a woman who gives birth do wrong? This is the famous question. So Amar lehen b'shah shekorat liyaled kofetzet ונשבעת shelo תזקק לבעלה. לפיכך אמרה Torah תביא korban. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai claims that the reason why she has to bring a korban is because she actually did do something wrong, namely that at the moment of childbirth she's in such anguish and pain that she swears she'll never be with her husband again. And for swearing falsely, she has to bring a korban for violating her oath. Matkifla Rav Yosef, v'ha mezidahi u'v'charata talia milta, ve'od korban shvuah bai atuye. So Rav Yosef attacks this in a halachic sense from two fronts. He says, number one, she does that b'chavana, and you're only supposed to bring a korban if you do something b'shogeg. And furthermore, if it's related to the fact that she took an oath, so we have a korban for a shvuah, and it's not the same animals that are prescribed for a yoledet. So it doesn't seem that that's really what's going on.
It doesn't take issue with the concept of like since when do we assume people, in different scenarios people will just do things and therefore we should prescribe the korban beforehand? Like every single woman who gives birth is going to do this? Like that's the default?
I see what you're saying.
It's just a strange concept. We don't have in other situations where we default prescribe if you go through this sort of scenario, you're going to bring a korban because you're going to do something wrong. Sarah gets epidural, and she actually, this, as far as I know, this has never happened. She the words are pretty. So would an epidural mean? I hear your question. It's a good question. We're fortunate to have the Rav with us, so I can deflect any questions to an authority much greater than me. Oh, Rav was due last week.
Are you serious? Mazal tov. Oh my goodness. Wow, so this is really Inyani Dioma. I didn't know.
It's going to tell us next week.
Wow, okay. So the Gemara actually, so Rav Yosef comes and attacks Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and it moves on to the next question. It doesn't give a response. And we'll see the Mefarshim now try to deal with it. But I think your questions are stronger, and there's other issues with Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's approach. So the Gemara now continues and asks another question. And the Torah also prescribes a different amount of time that a woman, there's 14 and 66 versus 7 and 33. Why is it different for the genders? Here we have a statement which, take it as you will, right? Zachar kol smechim bo mitcharetet l'shiva, nekeva she'akol atzeven ba mitcharetet l'arba'asar. So since the birth of a son is something that's very joyous, so she's only regrets what her husband did to her for 7 days. But for a female, where it's for a girl, it's less joyous. So she has 14 days where she is upset.
Only 7 days, because on the 8th it's already the bris.
It's already the bris. Good. Baruch shekivanta. So look at the very next thing. Right? Why is the brit milah on the 8th day and not earlier? The idea is that for 7 days they're not allowed to be together. So you wouldn't want a brit milah where the husband and the wife are not allowed to be together. But by the 8th day, of course, today you have all these
previous sentence.
Before you said that by not being together, I would have assumed that sevim means, because it says when you have a kid, you're not happy for 7 days.
No, because by the son they're happy. At least according to Rashi, it means that...
No, by the son they're happy, they're only unhappy for 7. That's why it says about the 8th day.
No, they said for 7.
Nachon. That's why you do the bris on the 8th day. You don't want them to be sad.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said.
My understanding was that this is... I hear what you're saying, and you might be right. My understanding was that this is talking about how for those 7 days, until she brings the... For those first 7 days, she's a Niddah. She's not allowed to be with her husband, and that's why they're upset. But I could be misunderstanding the pshat. Could be both. In any event, so that's the Gemara. So it's really the first section that we're going to focus on, and not about her bringing a korban b'shah shekorat leiled kofetzet ונשבעת שלא תזקק לבעלה. So we'll quickly just see 3 achronim in the Yaakov, how they try to resolve the fact that Rav Shimon bar Yochai is attacked by Rav Yosef and doesn't seem to bring a response. And then we'll move on to other midrashim. Okay, so we'll start with Harif, the commentary of Harif, in the screenshot there on the left side where it says Kofetzet ונשבעת. So his answer is as follows: אפשר לומר לדעת רבי שמעון בן יוחאי שאין שבועה זו בביטוי שפתיים, אלא היא מהרהרת I can't read it. מפשפשת בליבה. מפשפשת בליבה. That she doesn't say it out loud, but she thinks it, right? She's in the delivery room, she's on the birthing stool, so she's thinking all these things about her husband. She doesn't actually say them out loud with her mouth. So she doesn't verbalize an actual shvuah, but she's thinking in her heart. Belibav mitoch hatzar, because she's in so much pain. Sfateh naot, kind of like reminds us of Chana, the description, where she's maybe mumbling, or she's in so much pain she's not verbalizing it, but she's doing some kind of internal oath and maybe muttering something. ונשבעת שלא תזקק לבעלה. אבל קולה לא יישמע. Rabbi, you can't hear her voice. לפיכך מביא הקורבן מרופרף בן יונה, או משהו לחטאת. So he says that his answer is that the bird that's brought by the yoledet is yonah. It's a bird that kind of it chirps or it mutters. So he says it's a type of korban. It's actually, when the question is, shouldn't he have brought a korban shvuah? So he says enach hinami. It is a korban shvuah. It's just specific to a yoledet. It's a type that only a yoledet brings, and it's a different type of bird. It's a bird that mutters because her oath is not a normal oath. That she mutters it under her breath. Okay, that's the answer that the Rif gives to defend or save Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. If we look at the Yun Yaakov, he gives a different answer. So the Yun Yaakov in the screenshot, if you see where it says Korban in big letters, around 6 lines up from the bottom. So if you go up 2 lines from there, where it says Uveshem Hagaon, 2 lines direct on the Daf Rishon, the first page. So if you go two lines up from where it says Korban in big letters, it says Uveshem Hagaon, and then an acronym Admor something of Heschel, Zatzal. Shamati lefaresh the Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai shitato. De'amar b'Niddah degam yotze. Sorry, the screenshot. Yotze dofen chayevet bekorban. Right, a C-section. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says elsewhere that a C-section also, yoledet C-section has to bring a korban as well. It's not just that she has a natural birth.
How long ago did they do C-sections?
They discuss it in the Mishnah all the time, I think.
Never knew.
Yeah, it is discussed in the Mishnah.
It's very common. It's not like a Yetzadayfen.
Okay, so
I didn't know they could do C-sections in medieval times.
it's pre-medieval. Yeah.
Okay.
ובבכור על פי ריש הברטנורה, יוצא דופן שוב אינה מתעברת. And the Bartanura explains that the יוצא דופן here, that the C-section, I guess that maybe perhaps in those days, when you got a C-section, you wouldn't be able to give birth again. It was too dangerous. So if a woman needed a C-section, that was the last birth. Okay? So where's he going with this? ואם כן, תקשה למה נודרת היוצא דופן, כיוון ששוב אינה יולדת. So he says, according to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who says 2 things. He says the reason she has to bring a korban is because she swears she'll never be with her husband again. And he also says in a totally different context that if she has a C-section, she still has to bring a korban. But we know that anyone who brings a C-section can't give birth again. So why would she swear off being with her husband again if she can't have another child from the C-section? Right? So this is her last kid, so she shouldn't be worried about it. So his answer is לכך השיב בשפה שקורעת ללד קופצת ונשבעת, כן, שאז אינה יודעת אם תהיה יוצא דופן. דברי פי חכם כן עד כאן שמעתי. So what he's answering is that the Lashon of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, if we go back to the Gemara Niddah, he says, Amar lehem b'shah shekorat lelet kofetzet v'nishba'at. That this word kofetzet is, you could remove it and it wouldn't change the meaning, right? When she's about to give birth, so she swears off her husband. What is that? She jumps up and swears off. So he is middayek, and the kofetzet means she doesn't even know that she needs a C-section. That she's like, at that moment she jumps up and swears him off, and then she realizes, oh, this is a C-section, and then she realizes, oh, I can't have another child, so she's mitcharet. So this is a diuk that the Yun Yaakov makes. And just the last achron here, the Anaf Yosef. So he says as follows. So if you go down to where it says, Aval Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai l'shitato. So the Anaf Yosef's on the right side in the last line. So Aval Rabbi Shimon ben Yosef, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai l'shitato, the Darish time at the Kra. Kedida bebav metzia daf kuf tedvav amar aleph ubacham meduchte. Shapir hakshule umetaretz gavel tamed svirle tamed the Kra. Im ken yesh lomar ma shapir lebal ika taima b'gmar mishum dechol. Okay, dinoderet al da'at ba'ala hinoderet. Okay, so he brings this idea that we know that when a woman who's married, and I apologize, the screenshots are blurry, that there's a whole section in Parshat Matot about, right, Motzas Fatecha Tishmor, is that from different places? Basically that a woman who's married, right, that her husband is able to, Isha Yifrenu v'Isha Yikimenu, that if she makes an oath, once a woman's married, then her husband is able to annul or to keep the vow. So he says, in that case, and then there's a Gemara that talks about that's, whenever she makes a vow, therefore, it's assumed that her husband, she only makes a vow that she knows her husband will agree with the vow. Because he has the power to annul it. So why would she make a vow if her husband can just annul it? But at that moment where she's about to give birth, right, she's in such anguish, so she makes a vow, right, not to be with him. That's obviously not, right, when she says she swears off her husband, that's not something that he would agree to. Because she's violating this idea of doing vows in the proper context with the Isha Yifrenu. Okay, so again, without mamash katonti in terms of the halachic ramifications of these ideas, but it was just interesting to see how the different achronim tried to redeem Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai from the question of Rav Yosef. But I want to move on now more to the Agadic realm and kind of what we started this year talking about, which is what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is recognizing here is that there's something about childbirth that is unique, right? That according to the Anaf Yosef, when he says a woman, we have an assumption that she called nuderet al da'at ba'ala nuderet, but there's an exception to that, and that's childbirth, because there's something that's very, very different, and she's in such pain, but also it's a moment that almost transcends normal life, right? The moment of childbirth is something that is, she's in so much anguish, but there's also something that's simultaneous death and life that are intertwined in that moment. And we see the Midrashim talk about that in kind of a beautiful poetic language. So we'll start with Shmot Rabban Mem Vav, Mishnah Bet, where he says as follows, Hadu dichtiv, there's a pasuk in Kohelet, lechol zman va'et, lechol chefetz, et laledet ve'et lamut, a time to give birth and a time to die. Mikan amru abotenu zichronon levracha, yashva isha lamashber, tish'a v'tishim chalakim lamavet, ve'echat l'chaim. Shnema et laledet shehu et lamut. So the interpretation isn't there's a time to live and a time to die, but rather at the time of birth, it is a time of overwhelming death in that same moment. That even when a woman is sitting on the birthing stool, so she herself is wishing for or experiencing 99% death and only 1% life. So much pain, and modern times aside, I guess lots of time there was also tragedy that accompanied childbirth. But it's a moment that's of joy and tragedy that are intertwined together, and that of course ties back to the idea of another reason why a woman has to bring a korban, the more perhaps the classic reason, which is that there's tuma and death, right? The two are intertwined in this moment.
And it's interesting because it's literally taking the pasuk the opposite of what it means.
Right.
The pasuk is saying that there's a time for this and a time for that. But I guess that they do have some sort of relation.
It's saying that right at the moment of life there's death, right? But you could also take that also to the other side, which is when we die, it's also eternal life. Although the Midrash doesn't say that. But yes, you're right. Kohelet Pshad is saying, no, there's times for one and times for the other. And it's...
And then here it's saying it is... Yeah.
I think this is actually consistent with Chazal's general approach with Kohelet, which is to take the pshat and interpret it the opposite. Like it's right where this Kohelet says "V'amarti en simcha b'chaim" or something. It says, "B'simcha shel mitzvah," right? That no, he's saying that there isn't simcha in life, and you're saying no, there's simcha as long as you live in a particular way. Okay, the Midrash Tanchuma elaborates on this idea. Uvimlot yemei tahara. Lama yi mevia korban? Why did she bring a korban? Amro b'tein zichron levacha. Mea pi'iyot isha po'ah. So a woman screams 100 screams. Shneimar henaten me'ayin ufa'alchem me'afa. That you are less than nothing, and you are worthless. I think that's your efforts are worthless. Ma'u me'afa. She screams 100 times when she's giving birth. And since she's in such pain and such anguish, and this ties back to what we saw in the Gemara Niddah. So this Midrash Tanchuma agrees with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Gemara Niddah. Okay? The one more midrash, then we'll move on to kind of the main crux of the shiur. So Vayikra, but says as follows: Rabbi Levi patach hen atem me'ayin ufalchem me'afa me'ayin milo klum u'melicha sucha. Right, it means you're worth less than nothing. It's a reference to like a fetus or to a child, that's worth less than a drop. Me'afa me'apiyot me'isa po'a b'shas yoshevet al mashber 99 l'mita v'chad l'chaim to'eva yivchar b'chem. And then the continuation of that pasuk is that you should choose an abomination. You will choose an abomination. So what does that mean? Afal pi שהתינוק הזה יוצא מתוך מעי אמו מלוכלך ומטונף מלא רירין ודם, הכל מחבקין אותו ומנשקין אותו וביותר כשהוא זכר. Okay, so you will choose an abomination. It's a reference to a brand new baby. That it's so disgusting when it comes out, right? And we're all familiar with that, Baruch Hashem. But despite that, you choose the abomination. The way they're interpreting that pasuk in Yeshayahu is it's talking about the newborn. Even though it's so disgusting, it's coming from a place of death, but you embrace it with such love and such life. Again, it's describing this tension in the moment of childbirth between these two kind of polar opposites, and it's combining them together. And it adds, for good measure, v'yoter kshu zachar, right? Just as a nice afterthought. Okay, let's get into the main idea here. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. So when a woman is in when a mother's about to give birth, right? Her mind is obviously in a place that's if there's no pedus, her mind is filled with sorrow. She's thinking about death. She's thinking about life. But there's a miracle that's occurring, and the question is: Are we really mindful of that miracle the way that we should be? So the Midrash says as follows: Chamisha kolin yotzei misof haolam ve'ad sofo, ve'en hakol nishma. There are 5 voices or sounds that go from one end of the world to the other, and they are not heard. The sounds. What are the 5 sounds? B'shah shekortin et ha'ailan she'oseh pri, hakol yotzei misof haolam ve'ad sofo, ve'en hakol nishma. So when a fruit-bearing tree is cut down, the sound of that tree screams out, and nobody is, right. When a tree is cut down in a forest, right, and nobody's around to hear it, does it make it sound? The answer is yes. Specifically, a fruit-bearing tree. Uv'shah she'anachash nifshat, when a snake sheds its skin, it emits a sound, a scream that goes from one end of the world to the other, and nobody hears it. Uv'shah she'isha mitgareshet miba'ala, and when a woman gets divorced, she emits this sound. Uv'shah she'isha im ba'ala be'ila rishona, aval en kol nishma. Right, and when a woman first loses her virginity, uv'shah she'avlad yotzeh min haguf ad she'tera'et hashchina, and when a baby is first born, until it sees the Shekhinah again, or it's until that baby eventually dies. That there's a 5th sound that is emitted that nobody hears.
The entire life of that
All screaming.
is the sound, or
so I think it means at the moment of death, actually, based on the following sources, which are variations on this idea. But before we look at the following sources, what do you think this midrash is trying to say?
there's
These are all moments that relate to the circle of life, regeneration and degeneration. And there's some bigger meaning, something that's going on that maybe people don't pick up on it.
Yep, very good. Yep. The Gemara in Yoma says a similar idea, and then it adds something at the end that blew my mind. I thought this was beautiful. It says, Tanu Rabbanan, Gemara in Yoma daf chaf amud bet, Ilmale gal chama nishma kol hamona shel Romi. Okay, so if it weren't for the sphere of the sun during the day going from one side of the world to the other, we would be overwhelmed with this sound of Rome that constantly is filling the world. Vilmale kol hamona shel Rome nishma kol galgal chama. And if it weren't for the sound of Rome that was constantly filling the world, we would be overwhelmed by the sound of the sphere of the sun. Right? Tanu Rabbanan, shalosh kolot holchin misof ha'olam v'ad sofo. Ve'elu hen, kol galgal chama, v'kol hamona shel Romi, v'kol neshama b'shah sheyotz'a min haguf. Okay, there are three sounds. There's the two that we just discussed, which seem to cancel each other out somehow. The sun, the sound of the sun, the sound of whatever Hamona Shel Romi is supposed to mean, and the sound of the soul when it leaves this world. V'yesh omrim af leda, and there are some that add to this also the moment of birth, when the soul enters the world. V'yesh omrim af ridya, and there are some who say also ridya. Ridya, according to the commentaries, is a specific angel. Okay. Uve'ora banan rachamei aneshama b'shah sheyotz'a min haguf uvatlua. And the Chachamim, they asked for mercy from the sound of the soul leaving the world, and it was nullified. That the voice that goes out, the scream that goes out when a soul leaves the world, Chazal begged for that to be taken away, that scream, and their request was granted. It was nullified. So first of all, this language kind of reminds us of another Gemara in Yoma, a much more famous one around, the Yetzer the taiva for Avodah Zarah, that the Chazal begged for it to be taken away, and that was granted, and then also for the taiva of Gilui Arayot, but then they saw that chickens weren't laying eggs, so they, right, this idea of the Chachamim were begging for something to be taken away from the world. But why are the rabbis asking for this sound to be removed, and why was it granted? Okay? So let's keep going. I think we'll be able to fill in the pieces of the puzzle through the next two midrashim. So the Midrash in Shmot Rabbah in Perek Hey says as follows: Amar Rabbi Levi, Shlosha kolot holchot misof ha'olam v'ad sofo, ve'abriot beinehen enan shomot klum. Okay, so note that the version in Shmot Rabbah of this midrash, it adds this phrase that the creations within the two sides of the world that the voice is crossing don't hear the sound. Ve'eluhem hayom ve'agshamim ve'anefesh b'sha'ah sheyotzet min haguf. Okay, so this is similar to Gemara and Yoma, but it's a little different, right? The Yom parallels the sun. Gshamim perhaps not, parallels Hamona Shel Romi, and then the last one is the moment of death. That is identical with the Gemara and Yoma. Okay, so it brings some sources here, which I guess we can read, although it's less important for us. But Hayomi 9, how do I know that the sound of the day goes from one side of the world to the other and it's not heard? Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eli, Zeh HaKochav, Shu Shaf Barakia, Eino Ela Kemasar Sfarim Achirim. Kemasmer Hazeh Shu Natun Ba'etz. So the sun, it is like it's like something that's hammered into wood. I actually don't remember what that means. So apologies. I need to look at the Mefarshim to see what that analogy means. There's a pasuk in Tehillim that says your pipes call from one tehom to the other. The voice of your pipes call from one tehom to the other. So there's some trees whose roots descend very deep, 20, 30, 50 amot. And there are some trees where the roots only descend, very, very shallow into the ground. Right? And so the Gemara wonders, it says, right, when the rains fall from the sky, so if they only went 3 tfachim deep, so then the trees whose roots are much deeper wouldn't be able to survive. They wouldn't get the rainwater. Im shotim shel 50 amah, but if they went much deeper, all the way to the 50 amot roots, toref otan shel tzachim, it would drown the small trees. So how is it that all trees are able to be nourished from the same amount of rain? Ela zeh tehom ha'elyon koreh latachton, omer lo alev ani yored. So you have the upper depths calling to the lower depths and saying, you come up and I'll go down. And the lower depths say, great, I'll come. You go down and I'll come up. So the upper and the lower depths each manage to saturate trees with roots of different lengths.
Mycelium, there's some sort of communication that happens.
The mycelium? Say it again?
Underground. All like mushrooms, they're all like, there's this whole network that trees talk to each other and communicate.
You've seen
for
crowd
nutrition.
shyness?
What?
It's also when they grow big. Have you seen crowd shyness? They can. If you have these forests, so there's a type of trees that don't touch. It looks super cool.
Yeah.
But like,
There's some sort of underground communication between trees.
Wow.
It's legit, like scientifically.
Uh-huh.
It's wild. So it's cool that they would have tapped into that.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating.
Like they pass nutrients to each other. It's,
Different trees.
yeah.
Okay.
what, you want some weed?
Um,
Yeah. They do things like this. Like I've said, types of trees. This is looking up. That's the top of the tree. Understand what I'm saying? So they're communicating somehow down.
okay. Oh, that the trees communicate not to overlap their leaves with each other?
Yeah, this is looking up at the top of the trees.
Wow.
Leaves don't touch.
Okay. I think the point that we guys are bringing up is the point underlying this midrash, which is the
Communication across the world.
right, this idea that there's things that are happening. The world is interconnected. There's this unification to creation and a beauty in creation. But abriot beinhen and anshamot klum. Right, trees are communicating with each other, and we're totally oblivious to it. We cut down fruit-bearing trees, and we don't give it a second thought that it might be communicating with other trees, or that there's again this. You could take it to a spiritual place almost, but that there's a power to creation and the way that Hashem created the world that we are almost deaf to. בואו ראה כמה בין אלו וקוראים זה לזה, ובני אדם בינתיים אינם שומעים, הווה יראם כאל בקולו נפלאות. Okay, והנפש בשעה שיוצאת מן הגוף, that was the third thing, right, and how we got to this whole discussion, ובני אדם יושבים אצלו ואינם שומעים. Right, that when people are dying, there's people who sit next to somebody who's dying, and they don't hear the voice, the scream of the soul going back, leaving the body. הווה יראם אל בקולו נפלאות. אמר רבי ראובן, בשעה שאמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא למשה במדיין, לך שוב מצרימה, נחלק הדיבור לשני קולות ונעשה דו פרצופין. Okay, so this is brought as an aside because it's talking about voices. It's not directly related to the larger theme, but it's brought in Shmuel Rabbah. That's how it came up. So it says when Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, says go back to Egypt. So the voice split into simultaneously into two commands. Moshe shomea b'midyan lech shuv mitzrayim. Moshe heard go back to Egypt. Aaron shomea lech likar Moshe midbara. Right, because there's no the two of them were commanded like simultaneously to meet each other in the middle. So that's how this came up with this idea of Yar'em El B'Kolin Flot, that there's wonders or miracles that are done with the divine voice. But again, what is relevant for us is this idea that at the moment that the Sha'ashi Yotzet Min Aguf, B'nei Adam Yoshvin Etzlo Ve'enan Yoshvin. And in Bereshit Rabbah, there's a story brought to really hone in on this point and make it sharp. Amar Rabbi Levi, Shloshat Ve'im Kolan Holech Misof Alam V'Atzofo. Three things go from one side of the world to the other. Ve'abriot B'intayim Ve'enam Margishim. Right, and the creations don't feel it. Ve'elu hen hayom v'akshamim v'nefesh b'shah sheyotzet min haguf. Hayom minayin Amar Rabbi Yehuda atzvo sheusaf barakia ve'enu l'kamasar shezeh shu noseh ba'etz. Kshamim minayin Amar Rabbi Levi tomaton kol kol tzionecha v'gomer. Those we saw earlier. V'nefesh b'shah sheyotzet min haguf minayin. So one time there was this Rabbi Shmuel, who was the brother of Rabbi Pinchas ben Chama. He was in Tzipori, and he was sitting with some friends or with some colleagues. They were sitting around in Tzipori. Atat milta v'shayan gachachin. So one of them said a joke, and they were sitting around and they were laughing. They were having a good time. Amar lahon, and Rabbi Shmuel said to his fellows, Kama nafshei de'achua de'hu gavra mekatzatzai arazin umekatzatzai ilanot ve'atun yatvin gachachun ve'layadin. And Rabbi Shmuel's brother, Rabbi Pinchas ben Rabbi Chama, was at that moment was passing away. So he said to the people who were sitting around and laughing, he said to them, right, how many souls is Dahu Gavra, which is a euphemism for his brother. He's cutting down cedars, he's cutting down great trees at this very moment, and you're sitting around laughing and you have no idea. Right? That in their revelry or in their unwillingness to confront the brother that's dying, they ignore it, as it were, and they continue. Right, and what Rabbi Shmuel is pointing out is the absurdity of the situation. Right, the fact that they're sitting around laughing when someone's dying, they're not recognizing the fact that the death is imminent, and it's our lives are so frail and futile, and they're sitting around laughing, and they're not paying attention to something that happens to them, like right next to them or right around them.
When someone leaves the religion or leaves the religious life, the term is mikatzitz benetiot.
Yes.
If you wish to have that equivalency, to wish to understand, it means that there's an act of, even though it's a spiritual idea or it's a way of life or leaving life or whatever, it is as if he's cutting down something that was growing.
Right. With acher. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we'll conclude with the Ifei Torah and then just kind of a final thought. So the Ifei Torah in his commentary on this Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah, so he says as follows: Lefi הפשט נראה כי קולן הולך מסוף העולם ועד סופו, ולמען לא תחרישנו אוזני בני אדם מהקולות הגדולים והחזקים. וגם העולם מתערבב מהקולות האלה, עשה הקדוש ברוך הוא נס שלא ירגישו בקולות האלה. So he says, okay, the straightforward explanation is, why don't the creations hear these voices? He says, because they're so vast and so overwhelming that creation would not be able to stand them. So Hashem does a miracle that, okay, the people somehow don't hear the voices. That's how he says the pshat.
The dogs can hear. It's like dogs can hear some stuff that we can't.
That we can't.
In a different wavelength.
It's exactly. It's on a different wavelength.
Radiation and any waves, any radio waves that you're not supposed to be, receiving.
Right. So the voice of the soul is on a wavelength that our ears and eyes cannot comprehend. But then he adds, "V'karov lomar od ki derech musar amar," and this is pretty interesting because the Ifei Torah here he's not just explaining the medrash, but he's giving a commentary on what the medrash is really trying to say from a moral, ethical standpoint. Hen kolan olech misof. Don't do that, okay? Hen kolan olech misof ha'olam v'ad sofo, להגיד לבני אדם כי יש אלוהים בארץ המנהיג את הכל. Okay, that what is this medrash really trying to say? That when the voice of these things is going from one end of the world to the other, the day and the rains, it doesn't mean that there's this sphere of the sun that makes this overwhelming noise and we've evolved not to be tuned to that particular wavelength of the sun making a noise in some wavelength that we can't process. He's saying the point is that the day makes a noise. It means that when the sun goes from one end of the world to the other, it's making a noise as a testimony to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is governing the world at every moment. Uvnei Adam asher hema bentayim, and people are living in the world. They see the sun going from one end of the world to the other. Einam margishim bazeh l'rov hergelam bahem. They're so used to it that they don't hear it, which means that they don't pay attention to it. Which they're disillusioned. They might even have a cognitive dissonance, and they might even invent or delude themselves into thinking that there's nothing about it that's special, supernatural, or worth taking note. Right? Umonet hachama amageret le'adam ki Hashem echin ma'or v'shemesh. Right? Why does it mention the sun? Because that tells man that Hashem created the light that lights up the world. Right? The fact that rain exists, the fact that it's something that's so overwhelmingly wondrous, but we're so used to it that we never stop and think about it. So he takes it to a place of that people are too unwilling to note that there's a din va'onesh after that there's a cheshbon that comes. But the broader point being that the idea of this sound going out when the soul leaves the world is that how can you not recognize that there's something here that is just beyond the world, the day-to-day world, and marvel in that. And the Midrashi thing, again, this idea of this kol holech misof alam vad sofo is a poetic way of recognizing that. I think I'll just kind of conclude with some thoughts on perhaps this story of Rabbi Shmuel Achud Rabbi Pinchas ben Rabbi Chama, that there's really two ways to approach this idea. And you know, you take the halachot of Avelut, okay, or of Shiva, and you know, on the one hand, something about it seems profoundly bizarre that, you know, if someone loses a loved one and they're grappling with death, that you say, okay, now you have to perform all of these rites and rituals, you have to act very normally. I'm sure there's, you know, been lots and lots of divrei Torah on this idea of why, no, dafka, you have people come and talk to you, and you have, that there's something about that helps you actually accept and confront it, or to deal with it. But you know, this idea that Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Pinchas says that the human nature is to avoid a denial of death, right? Not to be able to confront the fact that we all have our own mortality, but to add these distractions or these ways to just have ourselves be able to live with it. And this is true in like many aspects of our life. That you know, perhaps what this midrash is telling us is that, you know, it's not good that the briot einan shomot klum, right? It's saying that, I think, almost as in a tragic way, that we should be more attuned to the fact that, you know, when life comes into the world, or when life leaves the world, that there's something about that should help ground us in the ephemerality of our lives, and a recognition of our Creator, who's coming to punish us, in the words of the Divrei Torah, but more just to marvel in the beauty of creation, and that's kind of a musar haskell that we're being taught in these midrashim, that all ties back, perhaps, although it's a bit of a stretch, to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and the idea that when a woman is crying out 100 screams, and it's this intertwining of death and life, that they're living together somehow, that there's this moment on a threshold of two incompatible things. Ela ledet ve'ed lamut. Kohelet says they're two separate domains, right? Life and death are two different things, and the Midrash is saying, no, there's a moment of a threshold where they interact, and we're so blind to these two dimensions that are coming together, and it's incumbent upon us to try to listen to this voice and try to internalize it and understand, see from it the presence of Hashem. Sure. What?
To give a korban.
To give a korban.
Thanks.
Shkoyach.
That was intense.
Bye.